Okay, great. And share my screen. All right, panelists, can you guys see the slides okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, Kim, you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. This is the last of the Listen and Learn sessions that we are hosting as part of this project that we've been working on. So my name is Kim Schlepfer. I work with Lotus Engineering and Sustainability, and I've been fortunate enough over the past 8 or so months to be coordinating the project that you'll be learning more about today in collaboration with CORE, Walking Mountains, and CLEAR. The work that we've been doing as a region, a mountain region across Eagle, Pitkin, and Garfield counties, has really been to look at where every community is at with their current building codes, and where we want to go with our current building codes to meet our sustainability and climate action plan goals as a region. And as we looked across the region and understood where everybody was at with certain codes, there was an understanding or a realization that a lot of our communities are on different codes. And as we look towards moving to achieve our climate action goals through the built environment and through our building codes, we really thought it would be worthwhile to organize local government staff, utility staff and experts, and our technical code experts in this region to come together to understand what it might look like to achieve a regionally consistent building code that also achieves our climate goals. And so really grateful to be here today, really grateful to have you guys here today. And you'll be learning a lot more about that approach to a net zero building code through our presentations today. We also have a few additional mini presentations we'll be sharing that we'll cover a few other aspects related to building code and green building, including workforce, our multifamily buildings and retrofits. And then we'll end with some resources to help you guys continue to stay engaged in this topic. So I think that's all for me. I'll be tracking questions throughout the presentation. So as you guys have them, please make sure to drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. And if I can't answer them right away, I will log them to follow up with you all. I think that's it for me. So I will pass it over to Gina, the Climate Action Collaborative Project Manager from Walking Mountains, to kick us off.
Awesome. Thank you so much for teeing up that project, Kim. And just one more note for our attendees, if you have an AIA number, we are offering CEUs for this session. And so you are welcome to include that in the chat, or if you'd prefer to share that privately, you can privately chat it over to Kim or email Kim, who will pop her email in the chat with that AIA number. So that way we can credit you for being here and listening in. Awesome. So just to share a bit about what we are going to be doing today, we're going to go through some welcome and introductions, and I will just elaborate briefly on some of that project context that Kim shared and talk about the purpose of why we're all gathering here today to learn about these interrelated projects. And then we will move into the learn portion of this webinar or this series where you'll hear 4 different presentations on interrelated sustainable buildings projects that are going on in our region. And then we'll kind of tie them all together and kind of share what we're hoping to do with all these workforce engagements. And then we will hopefully go into a discussion portion, permitting time permitting, where we will be learning from all of you, the workforce, around your interpretations of the direction that we're heading in, any gaps that you foresee in being able to meet a lot of the policy and direction that our local governments and community organizations are setting forth, and just trying to cultivate a really rich discussion so that way we can better understand what our workforce needs in order to support these goals. So Kim will be helping with that process as she shared. If you have questions or comments throughout this webinar, please pop them in the chat or email them over to us. We want to be collecting this feedback as best as possible. That's the purpose of today is to really share with you all and then learn from you what we can do to support you.
And
And
Gina,
then,
really quick, do you mind making me a co-host so I can chat my email to our attendees?
yes, absolutely. A co-host. Cool. You are a co-host now, Kim. Thanks for that reminder. Okay, so just a little bit on introductions. My name is Gina McCracken. I manage the Climate Action Collaborative for Eagle County Communities at Walking Mountains. And through this work, I facilitate the implementation of our climate action plan. So I work across several different sector areas, but buildings being one of our highest emitting sources within the community, a lot of my attention is focused on sustainable buildings and how we can decarbonize buildings across the region. Kim, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Kim Schlepfer, Managing Director at Lotus Engineering and Sustainability. We are based out of Avon and support communities and local governments across the state in advancing climate action, and specifically with a large focus around building codes. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. John Doherty, you want to give us an introduction?
Sure. Thanks everybody for being here. John Doherty, I'm the CEO at CORE, the Community Office for Resource Efficiency. We are a 30-year-old organization this year that supports building owners through decarbonization, through assessments, grants, rebates, and advising. Grateful to be here.
Thank you, John. And last but not least, Jeff Dickinson.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, Jeff Dickinson with Biospaces Energy Consulting. I've been a code consultant for the past really 30 years in mostly the western slope of Colorado and worked on advancing energy code projects. So I'm part of this project lead team as well.
Thanks. And we will have a slide sharing our panelists' emails towards the end of the presentation. So if you're trying to get in touch with any of us, we will certainly give you that information. Okay, so just to ground us in the why are we here today? Why are we doing these listen and learn sessions across the region? As we've shared and as you'll learn a bit more about, there are a lot of interrelated green building efforts going on right now, whether it be for new construction, which is most of the focus of today's session, or be it existing construction and how to decarbonize and make that more energy efficient. So we really want to share about all of this interrelated work with you and how we are trying to approach net zero for new and existing buildings. And then, as I shared before, listen to your all's feedback on the direction that we're heading in, the gaps in our workforce and the challenges that our workforce is seeing, but also the opportunities. So that's really the genesis of why we're here today. So some of our goals for today's session are for you all to learn about the future trajectory of new construction energy codes to build net zero buildings. For us to understand the gaps and opportunities in growing the local green building workforce for buildings, for you all to learn about the resources available to you to help achieve these goals through our community-based organizations, and then for you all to express your concerns and your needs. That way we have that intel and we can put resources and momentum behind those concerns and needs. Okay, passing it over to Jeff for presentation 1 on the regional net zero roadmap. And Jeff, I'll be toggling slides, so I'll try to pick up on that intuitively, but feel free to just say next slide if you need to.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Gina. Yeah, this really is all about that net zero code roadmap for the region. And hopefully this kind of thinking will get statewide so that we can really all be on the same building codes and have the same goals in mind. We've really involved a lot of people involved on a meeting-wise basis, monthly or so. We've involved the sustainability and building departments from each jurisdiction and other interested parties. We really also are really trying to educate the group on what net zero code elements mean. And you'll see as we define those, we're not really defining it per se, but what are the attributes of a net zero building? And, this is really all, again, get in alignment with our state and regional and national climate reduction goals. So that's really a big part of what we're doing. We've identified a stepped approach to achieve net zero through 2030. That's our target at this point, but of course it'll go beyond that. And we've tied it to the International Code Council's adoption. So building codes come out on a 3-year cycle. So 21, the IECC 21 has kind of been our focus, and then 24, 27, 30. So we've kind of keyed it to that a little bit, but loosely. As I like to say, there's a roadmap, but you can take slightly different routes to get there. So we're allowing uniqueness within each community to get there. Go ahead. Again, huge amount of participants in the region. All these jurisdictions, Eagle, Garfield, and Pitkin counties, great attendance. We've also had really good interactions with the utilities because they're really a big part as we move to electrification. Utilities and electrification, can they handle the load, and what's the best way to do it? At the meeting last night, we had representatives from Holy Cross there, and that was really great to be able to have a live dialogue with them, with some of the participants. Of course, great technical experts. Colorado is really blessed with having some excellent resources from Shums Coda. Hope Medina has been representing that well, and Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. And of course, working with the Colorado Energy Office as the sponsor for this, but also lending an amount of expertise. All right, next slide, please. So the roadmap mapping process. So the attendees I mentioned before, were what we call the cohort meetings. So really getting a lot of people involved in this. We're not trying to create this roadmap on our own. It's really a lot about input. So having those meetings, of course, almost all of those were Zoom meetings to get that input and have interactions. And then we've taken that initial feedback, and even before that, we've done a lot of research on policy programs, opportunities within the state, but also within the region and within the country. There's a lot going on. Nobody I've talked to about this says, oh, this is a new idea, I hadn't heard about it. So we're really trying to build on some of the other programs that are happening statewide. And now we're kind of in the workforce listen and learn mode, where really trying to hear what's happening, what you guys are seeing on the ground. How is it impacting you, as designers and installers and code officials? So that's a big part of it. And then we're going to have this workforce analysis presentation today. Really, that's a key to making it all happen. So we're taking all this information, continually refining it. I think on a daily basis, almost, it seems that we're refining those attributes and what this roadmap looks like. And then once we really get something honed, we're going to be presented to the boards and councils, and then so for adoption, and then we're working with going to support jurisdictions, building departments with enforcement and compliance. Okay, Gina. Next slide, please. All right, so what is a net zero building? So these are, and I'll put final in quotes a little bit, but this is pretty much the consensus of what our group has come up with. The cohorts have really worked hard to define this. So again, this is about the end state. It's not what we're saying should happen right away. It's what should happen in the future. That this is our goal. So again, what's our goal? How do we get there is kind of the roadmap. So a net zero building is powered by electricity, getting rid of decarbonizing the fuel sources, really important, and it really ties in with the utility goals. A lot of the utilities in the state and in the region particularly are moving to a cleaner and cleaner grid, possibly 100% renewables by 2030. So a building that's powered by electricity, uses renewable energy from the grid, but also on site, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. So renewable is a big part of it. Has the ability to store energy. That's with batteries. So we're looking at reducing peak demands. This really helps the utilities. So there's a lot of creative ways to do that. The simplest is kind of a battery backup with a Tesla wall. The future might be electric cars that plug in. So a lot of opportunities coming on that. We're also looking at, let's start with a building that achieves energy performance above the base building codes. So the codes have gotten better and better, as I'm sure most of you realize, but we're going to get there. We're getting there, but let's take it just a little higher. Let's make them a little tighter, a little more efficient. That really reduces the amount of electricity we need to pull from the grid. An area that's kind of a newer area in all this is the minimizing the embodied carbon in the buildings. So embodied carbon has everything to do with the mining and extraction, all the way to to getting it to the site, to what's in that material. So really trying to minimize that carbon. Local materials versus materials that have been shipped halfway around the world are a big start of that. Also, EV ready, electric vehicle ready. That's a big part of when we get to net zero. That's a big part of dealing with this climate crisis and the decarbonization. Gina? So as I've mentioned, the roadmap areas we've really focused on are electrification. So exemptions you'll see listed there. So we're clearly not going to say everybody has to get rid, or suggesting everybody has to get rid of their gas stoves or gas appliances right away. So we're open, and we've gotten a lot of feedback about this, a lot of good discussion. How do we provide exemptions for process loads, mostly in commercial, but that's a big part of the discussion, and you'll see it changes as we move forward. Energy storage, I mentioned the battery backup, energy efficiency, that's the above code. Demand response, didn't touch on that before, but it's really that peak load shaving. How can the utility and the grid get smarter and smarter to work with appliances and shut them off during non-critical times to be able to shed some of those peaks? So everybody's not running their air conditioners at the same time in the summer. We can kind of shed some other loads that will help reduce that peak. And then I mentioned the renewable energy on-site and off-site. Dig into that a little bit more. Okay, Gina. Next slide, please. All right, so the net zero roadmap itself, these are the first 5 components we'll discuss. So step A is that kind of 2024 code cycle. Step B is the 27 code cycle, and step C is the 2030 and beyond. So I'll discuss energy efficiency to start. Right now, state minimum code is the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. Most jurisdictions are getting pretty close to adopting that, or have already. And then also adopting the state electric and solar ready codes that are designed to get us ready for that next phase, electric ready, solar ready. Some jurisdictions are even requiring some of these things already. So as the codes increase, this is that above code work, the 2024 IECC, or perhaps a state low carbon code, will be enacted, and then the solar ready codes as well. So those will continually be updated. And a big part of this asterisks we've identified are technologies change. In 3 years, we don't know what's really going to be available on the market. So we designed in flexibility to this roadmap to allow for those changes, and basically revisiting those changes, those steps as we move forward. And then just getting to that step C, 2030 and beyond, again, getting those above, adopting the IECC, the most recent one, and then adding those above code options that may be available. House size, we haven't really talked about that much, but higher efficiencies for larger homes is definitely something that is part of it. So as home sizes increase, you may be required to have more renewables or a tighter building envelope. So that will continue. Some jurisdictions, again, have that in place. Some are thinking about it. Electrification. So basic definitions are electric preferred. So standards, that state electric code, electric ready code is part of that. So again, preferring it, but not requiring it. And then moving toward more all electric with exceptions, and then all electric with limited exceptions as the technology comes along and the appliances and those kinds of things, the backup systems get caught up. Energy storage, again, initially not requiring. I know that a lot of the utilities, Holy Cross in particular, is really pushing battery backup when you do solar. So that's something we're moving toward at this point. It's not a requirement, but it may become a requirement in the future. definitely hearing discussions about let's require it, by 2030, with any home that puts on a PV system. So demand response, industry's not quite ready for us to mandate that at this point, but it's a very important thing. And really, these last two are really a lot about the utilities and how to support a healthy grid and a reliable grid. Demand response, initially not requiring it, but maybe water heaters in 27, and in 2030, water heaters and furnaces would have it as well. Okay, onto the solar slide. So the new renewable pathway is basically we've identified two different steps or paths. One is the Roaring Fork Valley, and which has required, a number of jurisdictions have required renewable energy as mandatory on new homes of a certain size. And then the Eagle River Valley, not requiring it. I think they're more in Holy Cross jurisdiction, which is not pushing as much renewable on site at this point. So we're also acknowledging in these steps the grid is going to get greener and greener. So we're looking at and discussing reducing the amount of solar that may be required on a home if a jurisdiction chooses to be mandatory. And then by 2030 and beyond, if the grids are 100% renewable, that would be clearly an option and not a requirement. But again, a lot of interaction with the utilities so that we're on the same page with them and we can support that healthy grid. So next slide, please. So the practical implications. So some of them are pretty straightforward, but the energy standards, tighter, better, more efficient homes means you need to use less from the grid, and the workforce, really increasing the need for skilled trades, and we'll get into that later in the later presentation, but that's a big part of this. Marketing opportunities. There's going to be higher demand for these all-electric homes. In discussions we've been having with local HVAC contractors, they're seeing a huge amount. The majority of their work is in heat pumps now rather than furnaces. And then code compliance, really trying to get everybody on the same page. We would all love it. Everybody in the industry that I talk to is really, it would be great if from Aspen to Vail, we were all in the same code with very little variation. It just would make everybody's job a lot easier. So we'll field questions in the chat. Thank you. And I think we'll have a question session at the end, right? Gina?
Yeah, time permitting. Yes.
Yep, time permitting. Sounds good.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, next mini presentation of the series, we are going to learn about the Green Buildings Workforce Development Study from John Doherty.
All right, thanks everybody. So this was a study that was conducted through some funding that CORE received, but it directly tied into the work of the building code alignment and in the code alignment efforts for building this roadmap, as that was a key component, is to acknowledge that there are gaps and needs that need to be addressed in order to support code alignment and increased pace and scale at which we want to promote energy efficiency. You can go on to the next slide. So the focus of looking at this was first and foremost to understand that we were really looking at new construction as part of this Building Net Zero roadmap, but all of these components apply across both new construction and retrofitting. So you're looking at skilled trades in the area of plumbing, HVAC, electrician, and insulation. And strategies or approaches to advance that were in areas for plumbing, for example, with water heating, or HVAC with our heating and cooling systems, both in commercial and residential buildings. Solar lighting and appliances for our electricians, and then envelope and air leakage around our insulation contractors. And that's critically important for both retrofits as well as new design planning. Some of the skills that were identified based on the workforce study, not only from our contractors, but also from building owners, was these specific skills related to floor plumbing, pipe insulation, heat pump, and water heaters, how to work on those systems, understanding the technology that is available now and how that technology is evolving, and being able to be future thinking or forward thinking about how to equip our workforce to be able to meet the demands of evolving technologies to support this work in each of these areas. HVAC, around heat pump installation for heating and cooling, electricians for solar readiness installation, appliance and lighting upgrades, including induction ovens. And then in the area of insulation, we're talking about weatherization, floor and ceiling, the envelope, both from a design as well as construction phase. Next slide. So what rang through from all of the feedback we received, both from new construction design folks as well as folks providing technical assistance, is an acknowledgement from our workforce providers or our contractors that the future in skilled trades is needing to focus on green building, and there's no way to separate the needs of green building and skilled trades development as we think about the future needs of our region. Next slide. Oh, you can go on. There we go. So here's what we heard in each of the categories. When it comes to heat pumps, there is a need to better understand the installation or have the installation expertise in high altitude, low temperature communities, which we all know are part of what makes our environment unique. That the product sales are complex, and so oftentimes we're having to look beyond what is immediately available at our traditional contracting supply stores, and really understand how in each environment, in each community, there may be more details that need to be explored when making the decision of what the best heat pump technology is for your circumstances. The quality installation needs to be done in order to meet the standards required for rebates. So in order to create the most efficient way to do this work, that we have to ensure that we have quality installers that understand the products and know how to not only install them, but then maintain them and keep them in good working order. Heat pumps are currently outpacing furnace sales at this point, and heat pump installation is the largest demand in terms of skills in the region that people have identified a need for. Next slide. So when we looked at the data across the region, one of the things we were trying to understand is where is the gap in what new jobs need to be created or filled. And when we look across this particular chart, we're looking at Q1 of 2023 through Q4 of 2024. There have been 204 new jobs in skilled trades across the 3 counties involved in this work together. You can see by each of the areas, the highest demand in Eagle, Pitkin, and Garfield is in construction labor. And then when we look beyond there, it goes down. Next up is electricians, and then it's sort of split between HVAC and plumbing, depending on which community you're in. Next slide. When we talked about the issue and meeting the demand, one of the key topics was wages and workers. So recognizing that it's harder to keep up with competitive wages and the cost of living in our environment, that this is hard work. Green work is not clean work. It's hard work, and it can be dirty and complicated and require manual labor that is oftentimes a challenge, difficult schedules, high demands on people wanting to join the workforce in this space. Right now, the key skills that employers are looking for is that new employees are organized, they're exceptional with their follow-through and attention to detail, they have good verbal and written communication skills, and they have an outgoing personality, because we are, after all, engaging in people's businesses and in homes. And currently what we have is that you're okay, Gene, $23 an hour is where those are. You can go back. Okay, next slide. So when we look at demand and wages, when we consider those side by side, then it can be inferred that skilled tradespeople are traveling to higher paying counties within the region. So what you're seeing is that where people are working versus where their businesses are based or where they're living, there is a significant discrepancy because people are traveling to where there is better wages to do this work. So Pitkin County pays the highest and therefore has the lowest demand, while Garfield County has the highest demand with the lowest pay. And part of what we want to look at across the region is the need to even that out if we are going to have the meaningful impact we need to in moving forward this work in every part of the region. You can go on to the next slide. So migration data is really about looking at where people reside versus where they work and the total workers in that space. So resident workers are noted here in the lighter colored blue, total workers in the darker blue. So Glenwood Springs has several resident workers matching up to their total workers. Aspen, that number is about 50%. In Vail, a little bit stronger than Aspen in terms of resident workers against the total worker number that is in that community. Next slide. So when we think about building from our existing systems and leveraging partnerships, part of the study was to understand how are we going to fill this gap and what tools and strategies might we consider as we move forward this roadmap in order to help workforce meet the demands of implementing the roadmap. So conversations were held with and resources were identified in our education systems to help us build a stronger workforce and train up more people through organizations like Colorado Mountain College, Eagle County School District, and the P-TECH program, the career and technical education programs in our local schools. And then recently the endorsement, the climate literacy diploma endorsement that's now available in the state of Colorado, all as mechanisms to help us build and incentivize or entice people to join this work. When we talk about strengthening pathways, it's also about how do we build partnerships with these institutions and really leverage those partnerships for things such as apprenticeships and working with career centers throughout our region to build career pathways that are attractive, provide a sustainable living wage, and equip folks with the skills and competencies to really meet our needs, the unique needs of our region in supporting these code changes and alignment. Next slide. So when we talk about next steps with this, we have a little QR code. You're welcome to bring up the QR code about this study, but we're really looking at a few ways in which we will think about the future of supporting these needs, including helping businesses through scholarships and incentives to incentivize them to train up their workforce, as well as working with those partnerships and existing career pathways to build a pipeline of skilled workforce. There will be more coming out on this study, and we'll be sharing it out further in future conversations. But because it is so tied to this work, we thought it was important to incorporate it into this presentation. Next slide, I believe. All right.
And John, don't go too far because you're also going to be presenting on the multifamily housing study and the regional collaboration amongst this group.
Yes. Okay, we're going to keep rolling right into it. All right. So another initiative like the Green Workforce Study that was launched was to really understand the demand side in the space of where are the most complex and complicated opportunities to reduce carbon emissions in the built environment. And what we know is that the most challenging is often the multifamily settings. So workforce housing settings where there's multiple households within a setting, whether those are ownership or rental properties. So we began, Gina left me.
Apologies, John. I was trying to rename my name up in my screen, and for some reason it moved our slides around quite a bit. Okay, where are we? Here?
There we go, right there.
Okay,
Perfect.
sorry about that.
So what makes them most challenging is that they're large and complex, both systems internally, but as are the relationships of the combination of people, HOAs, et cetera, involved. So what we aspired to do through this part of the project is understand what is the demand across the 3 counties. So working across 4 clear and Walking Mountains and the Climate Action Collaborative and our local officials, we were able to identify demand side of how many multifamily properties are there across the 3 regions and what are the opportunities to do work in those spaces. Our goal out of that is to be able to understand the economy of scale that could be created by targeting those multifamily properties across the 3 regions, where we might provide incentives, grants, advising, rebate services that could come from any one of your local nonprofit community partners that are helping to advance this work, as well as state and federal grants that could advance this work, and be able to deploy them with those property owners that are ready to go in this space. So this ties into helping us understand a couple of things. One, code alignment across these properties in the 3 counties could allow us to move more quickly through that process. Second is when we think about the workforce that I just spoke of, training them on a consistent set of code and then consistent set of strategies allows us to bulk purchase, bulk deploy workforce strategies and technicians in a more efficient way that allows us to move the work faster. And third, it creates an opportunity to give us demonstrable projects in the 3 counties where they can be replicated on future projects that may be complex, where we don't have yet a property owner who's ready to move that forward. You can go on to the next slide. So our approach was to use assessor data. We identified 70,303 multifamily units across the 3 counties. We then did outreach to all of the HOAs, asking questionnaires about the retrofit program that CORE could make available. This was focused on CORE, but will be inclusive of all of our nonprofit partners and local government partners and utility partners when it comes to creating solutions. And of those that responded to our questionnaire, 92% of the responses identified a need for energy efficiency and or fuel switching projects on their property. And 100% of those said if there was assistance and support and resources, they would move those projects forward, which is all a positive sign, both for our environment and our carbon emissions goals, but also for our workforce and designer partners that are hopefully on this call or going to listen to this later to understand the demand is there, and we want to help you get there with us. Next slide. So we have about 40 properties identified for future targeted outreach as more funding and resources are secured. We have met with multifamily owners of some of the buildings, targeting predominantly low to moderate income families to establish agreements to do energy assessments and building benchmarking as the first step to understand the opportunity. And then our plan will be to take the contractors and engineers that we've engaged with to begin to identify what the best opportunities are for those particular HOAs and work with our community partners to identify the resources and the contractors that can help implement. And we plan to continue to pursue funding as part of our grants, incentives, and rebates program to make solutions available across the region. Next slide. So practical implications. The study survey indicates there are property owners who want high performance buildings. From a workforce perspective, conducting energy efficiency and electrification retrofits will require a larger skilled workforce that we've already spoken about. And when it comes to local assistance, it's really going to be critical that organizations that are participating in this cohort work collaboratively and together to leverage the greatest amount of resources, as well as this roadmap to help us move as efficiently and effectively as possible as we move the work forward. All right.
Great.
I don't
Thank you
think I
so
have another
much.
slide. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're all good now, John. Thank you so much for sharing about those initiatives that are coming out of CORE. So we are almost nearing the point where we want to hear from all of our workforce and answer any questions that you might have in real time. But first, before we break for that, I do just want to share about several resources that you all as workforce can engage with here across our communities. So if you are doing a project in Garfield County, the community support organization that you can go to learn more about local rebates and anything related to buildings resources, but particularly those incentives is going to be CLEAR, which also facilitates Garfield Clean Energy through Garfield County. If you're up in Pitkin County and you are doing work, you're going to want to talk to CORE, which is the organization that John Doherty here is with. And this would also apply for the Upper Roaring Fork Valley. And then for the Eagle River Valley projects, you're going to want to contact Walking Mountains here in Eagle County, who can direct you to various resources and answer your questions. But just know that the point we're trying to drive home here is that these three organizations are collaborating a lot, and we talk to each other a lot, and we want to help you. And so if you give Walking Mountains a call, even though you're working on a project in Garfield County, we will help you get to the right people. So the different services that can be provided by these organizations. So all three organizations, CORE, CLEAR, and Walking Mountains, can do things like provide energy assessments and provide you energy efficiency advising. We have cost and feasibility studies on hand and ready to share, as well as electrification case studies. We have preferred contractor lists, so we can help you source contractors if needed and provide advising on various contractors for different projects. And then, of course, we can provide consultation on grants, local, state, and federal rebates, as well as other financing solutions that might be of value. CORE and CLEAR can also provide code compliance planning and implementation advising, which is not a service that Walking Mountains presently provides. John, I lied. I might call you back in to touch on the Regional Building Performance Hub.
Sure thing. So as a result of all of this work, one of the things that CORE's really invested in partnership with all of these organizations, just like Gina was just highlighting, is how can we make services more accessible, more responsive, and really provide a hand-holding experience to navigate all the components, from how you engage with the services that are available throughout the region, how you leverage the education and training that is needed in order to best be able to do and move some of this work forward, how we meet policy compliance, and then accessing the dollars in order to move projects forward in doing this work. So everything that we've talked about today comes together in what we are developing as a regional building performance hub that is really designed to help people have a single place to go and then get connected to the resources as quickly and efficiently as possible. So like Gina said, if you contact the Building Performance Hub and we identify it's an Eagle County project, then we are going to connect you to what resources folks like Eagle County can provide through Walking Mountain Science Center or Garfield County through CLEAR. But we also are trying to bring together larger, again, economies of scale with our workforce and with our funding resources in order to make those resources as quickly available. We know that oftentimes this can be an intimidating process for both our contractors and our people advising folks who are building a new home or building a new office space, but it's also frustrating for them when they get into the process and it becomes labor intensive with complicated rebate forms to fill out or not understanding the code. So the intention here is to provide a concierge support that can guide them individuals through that process and remove as many barriers as possible so that we can move as many projects forward as possible in our region with our partners. So that's the Building Performance Hub. It is in development and will be up and running, fully up and running as of 2025 and accessible to all of our partners, community stakeholders, business owners, designers, architects, and contractors to be able to access and get customized service and guidance on specific projects.
Thanks, John. Okay, Kim, do you want to chat about the Building Code Adoption Enforcement Grant?
Yeah, absolutely. So the last thing we wanted to leave you guys with is a couple of state and federal resources that can also help as you all are navigating new codes, net zero approaches, electrification, and things like that. So the first we wanted to share is the CEO Energy Adoption and Enforcement Grant Program. This is a funding cycle that is available every quarter, and local governments in the region excuse me, are looking at this as a means to further the work that we did with the Net Zero Roadmap, and make sure that our workforce is really well trained and understands the new requirements that came with the adoption of the 2021 IECC, which was the first sort of phased step in our roadmap. This is really a grant opportunity for local governments and nonprofits, but we wanted to make you all aware of it just in case the jurisdictions you work in apply for this grant program. There is interest in the region, and so we may have future training opportunities coming through this soon. Next slide, please. CEO also has a lot of really great resources on their website for the building industry. The first that I wanted to point out is a customized energy code training. I will say that the training has to be at least on the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. But if you reach out to CEO, and we will send the slides after this, you can access these links. You can request a customized training for your team, for a group of folks, and they will provide it for free, and they will really customize it and tailor it to the needs of your organization. They also have an energy code adoption toolkit. And again, this is really geared towards more of that local government audience. But within there, you'll find details around cost impacts of adopting new codes, major changes that happen between the different IECC code cycles. So if you're working in a jurisdiction that has the 2015 IECC adopted, and then the next day you turn around and you're working in a jurisdiction that has a 2021 code adopted, you can jump into that toolkit and really understand the key major differences between the codes that you're working within. And then the Colorado Building Code Helpline, I'm sure a couple of you guys on the call today have used this resource. It is a fantastic resource that the state offers, and this is just a ongoing helpline. At any time, if you have a question about a code requirement, if something is not clear, if you just need clarification, whatever it might be, you can submit any question to that helpline, and you'll hear back within 48 to 72 hours on your question. And then I think there's just a couple more quick ones. So Building America is a DOE resource, and it has a ton of technical support tools and resources related to high performance buildings. Some of our code experts working with us on this project endlessly emphasize that this is one of the most important websites, resources that they've leveraged throughout their career. So highly encourage you guys to check it out. On the topic of electrification, the Beneficial Electrification League of Colorado is a coalition of stakeholders that's working to advance beneficial electrification across the state. You can find more information about them at loveelectric.org, and they also have a compository of case studies, cost studies, and other helpful information as it relates to electrification technologies. And then the last resource is the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. This is a nonprofit that works in Colorado, and many of you may have heard of them. Shorthand for their name is SWEEP. And they work with local jurisdictions across the state to help get more advanced codes in place. If you ever have a question, they do a lot of cost studies, a lot of just sort of understanding the market and where things are moving. And so if you guys have questions and can't find other resources, they are a great resource to reach out to and can point you in the right direction. And I think
Awesome.
that is our final, resources. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate you. So just to kind of close it all together, one of the biggest things that we want to emphasize is that we really want our workforce to be connecting with each other and sharing amongst themselves. And then also connecting with local government. And so you can forge those relationships. And when you have questions about code or need to give feedback on how code is being interpreted, those relationships exist. And then also connecting with your community support organizations, such as Walking Mountains, CORE, and CLEAR. We are here to help. We are here to support you. And so we want to keep this collaboration and this momentum going as we charge forward with more advanced codes. So if you're a workforce and you're wondering, okay, how can I help this effort? I agree. We want to move in the direction of net zero codes. Staying on top of the currently adopted codes in the communities that you work in goes a long way. As you've heard us say a few times throughout this webinar, a big underlying goal of the work that we are doing across the region is not only to get codes to a more sustainable sustainable standpoint, but also to unify those codes because we understand that it gets really challenging when communities are on different codes, even though we share a workforce. And so please be reaching out to local government if you have questions about the code. There are mixed match codes across the region. And so we want to make sure that our workforce is aware of those, but that we are trying to fix that and get us on a uniform code across the region. If you have workforce needs or ideas, we really want to be hearing from you. And when I say we, I'm talking about us as your community support organizations, Walking Mountains, Core, and Clear. The more that we know about the challenges that you're experiencing and the hurdles, as well as the things that are working really well, the more that we can support and direct resources towards those initiatives and in the feedback that we're hearing. If you're a designer, we need to be out in front of planning for net zero and all electric. We need to make sure that this is coming from the top down. And so it's really the direction that our local governments and our community organizations are heading in. And so we need to be making sure that we are designing with net zero and all electric in mind. And then last but not least, staying on top of and attending training opportunities for new codes, not too dissimilar from this one. Funding opportunities and new technical trainings are going to be really beneficial. Our community support organizations, Walking Mountains, Core, and Clear, have a lot of information on these local webinars and resources that you can go to learn more about new technologies and funding opportunities. So please lean on us if you are curious about where to get more of this information consistently. Okay, call to action. In the case that you need to or want to contact us after this presentation, feel free to take a snapshot of this PowerPoint slide, or we'll be sending the slides to you in the follow-up so you can have access to our emails and reach out to us if you have any questions. Okay, and we have about, what time is it? 7 minutes left. And so if we wanted to do or save some time for some discussion questions, we are very happy to hear your feedback on the call. You're welcome to pop comments or feedback or questions into the chat as you've been doing throughout the slides. But some of the big things that we've been asking of our workforce, especially in these in-person listen and learn sessions, is this what you need as local workforce? So what are your needs? And then what else do you need that we haven't identified or been working on? So I interpret that as like, what is our future work as a collection of organizations that are working together to advance net zero new construction? Also, where do you see barriers in moving this work forward? How can we put resources behind the barriers that you're seeing and be made aware of them? And on the flip side of that, where do you see the opportunities? So if folks in the webinar have anything that they want to share aloud, you're welcome to raise your hand and I can give you talking permissions, or we can just continue to field questions through the comments in the chat. Thank you for popping our contact information to the chat, Kim. Questions or comments from the group? Okay, yeah, thank you, Kim. Okay, I'm not hearing anything from the group, so just want to reiterate Kim's thank you for attending this call today. Your feedback is incredibly valuable. Oh, it looks like we got something into the chat. From a designer, unification of codes would be awesome. Any jurisdictions giving resistance. Yes, unification of codes is definitely a big underlying goal here.
Gina, do you mind if I jump in with that one? So Martin, I so appreciate that question. And I think yes, the answer is yes. I think unfortunately, a lot of our jurisdictions, whether it be the council or local government staff, have like to put their own unique touch on building code. One thing that our team is going to be doing over the next 5 months is coordinating presentations to local governments to encourage them to adopt this roadmap and adopt basically a resolution that says we will work together as a region to try to get to unified codes across our local jurisdictions. We'd be happy to keep folks in the loop if you guys would be interested in knowing when those presentations are. I think something that's so important is like it only goes so far for a council to hear from someone like me that we need unified codes. I think it's really the work, folks who are working in these different codes every single day and are struggling with the differences between them. Those are the voices that I think councils need to hear in order to actually really move this forward. And so I guess I would say, yeah, I think there are a couple jurisdictions, and I won't name names right now, but happy to follow up with that offline, Martin. And if there's any interest in staying in touch with when those scheduled council sessions are, just to pop in for a really quick public comment, or to shoot those jurisdictions an email, we'd be happy to keep you guys in the loop. So.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, I can't echo that enough. It really is impactful for councils to hear from workforce and folks that are outside of the space that we are in. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions come up in the chat or anybody with a raised hand in the audience. So thank you so much for attending this webinar today. We hope that you leave feeling a little bit more educated on the work that our local governments and our community organizations are working on when it comes to net zero new construction. And so we want to continue this conversation and continue to work with you into the future. We will be sending a recording from this session out to everybody that registered. And so you will have access to this if you want to return to anything that was mentioned. We will also be sending out the slides, and so that way you can get into some of those links that are embedded there and just revisit